Hi everyone, and welcome to this walkthrough for the very first Alteryx challenge. My name is Aurora, and I am a Tableau and Alteryx consultant here at the Information Lab, and I'll be taking you through this challenge. So let's jump straight into it. This challenge was called Join to Range, and I've got the starter file open here where we can see our challenge requirements. But I've actually summarized them for us here into two. So the first requirement is to join the postal range table to the customer table, and the second is to then summarize this customer table. We can refer back to the longer requirements up here when we're actually summarizing to get the precise things we want to group by. But for now, let's run our workflow and have a look at our inputs. So our first input is this customer table, and we can see here we have one row for each customer. We have some additional information such as their store number, customer segment, and whether they are a responder or not. And then we have the postal area, which we can see each customer has an individual postal area that they are based within. Then we also have our postal area range. Now in this table, we can see that instead of having one individual row for each postal area, we have a range. And for this range, we have the region that the postal area is within, we have the sales rep, and we have the expected revenue. So what we actually have here is the minimum and the maximum postal area for this region. To be able to join the tables together, what we actually need is we need an individual row for each postal area so that it looks a little bit more like this, as in our customer table. So we'll be primarily working on this table here before we can join it to the customer table. The first thing we want to do is we want to split this column for range, and we want to have two columns, one which gives us the minimum and one which gives us the maximum. So we do that with our text to columns tool. So we want to configure this to split our range so we can see it's already set to this column. And then we want to specify our delimiter. So in our case, the delimiter is a hyphen. But if I want to double check that, I can go ahead and look at our table and I can check what that delimiter is. And we also want to make sure that we only have two columns. So if I run this, we'll be able to see the results. And here we go, we've got two columns, one being the minimum, two being the maximum. The next thing we want to do is we want to just check the field types. So we can also do this in the metadata, and we can see that actually our minimum and maximum are currently strings. So using our select tool, we can update that so that they are now classed as numbers. And I'll just use the bigger form of integer int64. And whilst we're here, we can also rename our columns. So I'm going to call them min and max. And again, we just run to see the results. So now if I switch back to my data view, we can see that my column is min, my columns are min and max. And we can see that they are both integers. So that gets us to a place where we can actually now use the generate rows tool. And this will allow us to generate a row for each postal area within that boundary of our minimum and our maximum. So if I connect this tool up, we now need to configure it, and we can do that on the left-hand side here. So the first thing is we want to name what our new column will be called, and it will be called post area. And then we want to tell our tool configuration what that initial expression is. So what is our starting point here? So our starting point is going to be our minimum, and we can add that in through this window here, which pops up if you click on the three ellipses. The next thing we want to do is we want to say what that condition expression is. So this is what the tool will be checking for each time it creates a row. It's going to compare that row to something. So instead of comparing it to the number 10, we want it to compare it to the maximum. So we go ahead and add that in. But you can see here that it still has the old field name, which we need to change. So we need to change that to post area. So even though we updated it up here, it doesn't actually feed through to the other sections. So we'll have to do the same down here as well. Post area. And now this looks correct. So if I'll just go through top to bottom and explain. We're going to create a new field and we're going to call that field post area. To create this new field, we're going to start at the minimum of our range. And we're going to actually, if we look at the bottom, what we're going to do is we're going to add 1 to that minimum. Then we're going to take it and we're going to compare it to our max. If it's less than our max, we're going to keep creating new rows until we actually hit our max. So if I run this again, we can now see our results, and you can see we've gone from 5 records to 101. And now we have a postal area for each number starting from the minimum going all the way to the maximum. And you'll see here that all it's done for all the other columns is it's duplicated every single column for each new postal area. Once we go into our new postal region, you can see that this updates here as well. So now we're in region 2, and again we have each new postal area within that region. And this means that we can now actually join to our customer table, because now we have an individual row for each postal area. So if I bring on my join tool and I'm going to connect it up, so on the right hand side I'm going to put my postal area table, and on the left hand side I'm going to put my customer table. The main thing we need to do here is we need to ensure that we configure our joining condition. So our joining condition will be the postal area from the left to join to the post area on the right. We can also just have a quick tidy up of the rest of our fields. So what we want to do here is we want to deselect our min and max. We don't need that anymore. And we don't really need our range either. And we can also deselect one of the post areas. So we can see we've got postal area, which is from the left, post area from the right. So I'm just going to deselect the one from the right. Now, when we run this again, we can see that we have successfully joined our region and our sales rep and the expected revenue onto our customer table. The last thing we want to do quickly here is we want to actually check, have we got the same number of records? So in our join, what comes out is 2,678 records. And on the left hand side, we can see that that coincides with what actually went into the join. So this means that for every customer that went in, we found a match, and all of those rows came out of the join successfully. And so we've actually now met our first requirement. So we can go ahead and move on to summarize our customer table. So we'll just drag on the summarize tool, and we can now refer more to the instructions, and let's have a look. So it's saying summarize the customer data by region, sales, sales rep, and responder, and then give a count of the customers. So we want to go ahead and group by region, sales rep, and responder. And now we want to count our customers. So we can just go ahead and click on add and count. And this should give us our final results. So if we look at the output from the summarize tool, I have 10 records and 4 fields. And if I look at the output provided in the starter file, I also have 10 records and 4 fields. So this brings us to the end of this walkthrough for the very first Alteryx challenge. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.